Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Thumbnail, video title, says it all today. When titanium watches are as affordable as they currently are, why would you buy steel? I think 5-10 years ago the situation was quite different. Titanium watches were few and far between and always much more expensive than their stainless steel counterparts. But now in 2023, more and more micro brands and big brands are offering affordable titanium watches in their lineups. Now, I have bought a few timepieces myself over the last couple of years, and I can see the material becoming an increasingly important part in my personal collection in the years to come. But what do you think? Do you prefer one material over the other, or do you like having a mixture of both in your collection? Are some watches better in steel and others in titanium perhaps? I'm looking forward to some healthy debates in the comment section, but I'm not reviewing a lump of metal here today. There are actually a couple of watches involved, both by Citizen, both from the ever popular ProMaster series, both owned by Aussie subscriber Paul from WA. Thank you again, Paul. You may recognise the name from the Boulevard parking meter video from a couple of weeks ago. He picked up not one but two of these titanium beauties, both on sale, both for less than 400 Aussie dollars. That's around 270 USD at the current exchange rate. So automatic, ISO rated, full titanium, $270. Why would you buy steel? Let's flip the camera and find out. Okay, so Paul sent me two of these. They're essentially the same watch, one in green, one in blue. Now, you know I am a real colorist when it comes to blue watches. I'm just not a big fan of them. So I am going to put that to one side and concentrate on the green one. I will, of course, bring the blue one back. Outdoor macro shots, dial shots, etc. a little later on in the video. Now, I say this every time I review a Citizen these days. One of the big appeals is the warranty. If you're buying this from an authorized dealer, just as Paul did, you are getting a 5-year warranty, and that's on their automatics as well as their eco drives. You need to spend big bucks on a Tudor or an Omega if you want to match that. It is fantastic, therefore, to see a company back its affordable models with a cracking warranty like that. And that was a rather neat segue into the asking price, wasn't it? Well, as always, Citizen's RRP is wildly optimistic. This is not worth 1,150 Aussie dollars. Go home, Citizen. You are clearly drunk. I don't think it's even worth the $699 that you can buy it from an online retailer for. You're knocking off another 100 plus if you're prepared to go to eBay, but do remember you won't get the 5-year warranty that way. You'll be stuck with a 1 year. But if you're prepared to do a bit more digging, or you're prepared to be a bit more patient, Paul was able to score both of his for $399 each from the same Aussie retailer. That is about 265 USD at the current exchange rate. That is a fantastic price. Now you're talking. That really puts this titanium watch head to head against more economical steel rivals from Orient and from Seiko. So this one is the NY0100-50X. The blue one is the same but -50M, featuring a Miyota in-house caliber 8204 because Citizen owns Miyota. Now this watch probably looks rather familiar. In fact, it probably looks like a cross between the NY0085 and the Fugu. Now perhaps even more than the Seiko Prospex line, Citizen's ProMaster line have a real look to all of them, I think. Definitely form over function with large and not particularly attractive handsets in all three cases here, and ProMaster signatures such as the unusual 12 o'clock index and that signature crown down at the awkward 8 o'clock. And I think it's appropriate that we look at this NY0100 in that particular sandwich because it kind of splits the price and the specs of those other two watches, the 85 and the Fugu, pretty much down the middle. You can get the Fugu for 600, you can get the 85 for around 300 here. So if you're picking this one up on sale, it splits them in terms of price as well. And it's very similar to both of those in terms of dimensions as well, those being 41.5 in diameter. Now they call it a 42, I measure it slightly smaller, 13.4mm thick with a 48.5 lug to lug. Now lug width is 20, there is no taper whatsoever on the bracelet, it's 20 all the way to the clasp, which is back up to 22. The key dimension with this titanium watch though, the key titanium difference if you will, is the weight or lack thereof. Full size ISO rated dive watch, 111 grams on a bracelet. You'd be looking at $150 for the equivalent Citizen if this was stainless steel rather than tie. Now, normally one of the downsides of using grade 2 titanium is that it's dull to look at, has a slightly unusual feel to it, and it doesn't take a polish. But this is not grade 2 titanium. This is Citizen's own proprietary super titanium, and it very much takes a polish, as you can see here. Not saying the case finish is ridiculously fancy, because it isn't, but you do have a brushed upper surface, polished sides, all very nice indeed, and it has a much more pleasant feel in the hand because it also uses Citizen's proprietary Duratect coating. Now, I'm not sure how much action this one has seen on Paul's wrist. The warranty card was dated December. He does have 2 of them, and I've had it for a couple of weeks, but there are virtually no scratches on this one whatsoever. And I know from my ProMaster, which is also Duratect and super titanium, I've been beating that one pretty hard for 4 months, and it has pretty much no scratches on it whatsoever. So it's titanium with some of the advantages, but without some of the disadvantages. The bracelet is also titanium, also coated, and also has mixed finishes, which is very nice. Now, it kind of looks like a 3-link oyster style, but these are fused, so it only has the articulation as if it had single links anyway. It is a pin and collar system, tiny collars in the center sections, and this is a titanium clasp, featuring a scissored milled scissor made of titanium. It says base titanium on there, and a pressed titanium upper. Triggers, double triggers either side, and 3 holes of micro adjust. I gotta say though, this is a little bit flimsy feeling, probably the flimsiest feeling part of the whole watch. The pushers are also not all that great. Definitely you notice the lack of steel there. Case back is also made of tie and is screwed down. ISO 6425 rated, 200 meters, divers with an apostrophe watch after all. Usual spec sheet around the outer edge, Citizen ProMaster, fairly shallow etched in the center. I've not seen do not open service center only on an auto by Citizen though. Eco Drive, I get it, but this is just an 8000 series. This could be repaired or more than likely replaced by any decent watchmaker. So not quite sure that that is necessary. Now, if I show you the side profile again, you can see the case back does protrude quite a lot. Very slim case, thick bezel, thick case back. Now on wrist though, that does tend to dip into the flesh on the back of the wrist, meaning you're just left with the thin mid case. It wears well, I'll show you in just a minute. Bezel action, normally another area where titanium watches don't perform as well as their stainless steel counterparts. This one is okay though. 60 click, which tends to be the Citizen way rather than the 120 click of most Seiko bezels. Sounds okay. Feels okay. Yeah, definitely not as nice as steel. This is not a Christopher Ward or a Tudor bezel, but then again it's a $300 US watch, so it shouldn't really feel like that. Maybe I'm expecting a bit too much of it. Let's go outside, let's go macro, let's have a look at both watches, let's have a look at the dial and hands. Now they're both the same apart from the colour essentially, the X in green, the M in blue, both with sunburst effect on the dial. It is strong, but it's not ridiculously strong. Both watches feature the same Miyota 8204 caliber. That means a day-date complication at the 3 o'clock in black. So not exactly colour matched, a welcome change from white in terms of the way it looks, if not necessarily in terms of how easy it is to read against those dark dials. That's a hacking and hand winding 21 joule movement, by the way, with a 40-hour power reserve. It only winds in one direction though, so you can feel and hear the rotor spinning more than you would in the equivalent Seiko diver, for example. Much like the equivalent Seiko, those indices are pressed through from the back rather than fully applied, kind of embossed therefore. High polished silver surrounds with mini watchtowers at the 6 and 9 and a tiny pair of Y fronts at the 12, or at least that's what I see, but then I am a bit special. Handset very much in the ProMaster tradition, so slightly ugly then, but very effective. Hour and minute hand both segmented into 3 sections, flat, high polished silver surrounds again, but bringing a welcome burst of colour in the form of the red surround to the minute hand and the red tip of the second hand. I wouldn't necessarily say that the red matched the green or the blue, but it does add something, I suppose. Plenty of dial text if that's your thing, a bit too much if that's not your thing. Citizen brand name above the pinion, ProMaster logo, automatic divers 200 meters and titanium all beneath it. They could probably have balanced the dial a bit better by putting the logo above the name, above the pinion, in my opinion. There's an angled chapter ring with minute markers to finish things off, but because this is a Citizen and not a Seiko, it mostly lines up with the dial and the bezel insert. I have come to respect Citizen more and more over the last couple of years, and that is definitely one of the reasons why. The Lume is also fantastic. Citizen use their own Lume called Natu-Light. Kind of resembles BGW9 in terms of its tone, and considering this is an affordable diver, the Lume on the hands and the indices is really pretty good, especially as the indices are only embossed and not properly applied. By the end of my test, it's beginning to look a little patchy though, but it is still pretty legible. And here's a comparison with the Seiko 5KX GMT, because why not? I figured I would start using this one as a benchmark because a lot of people have it, and because it's a bit more modern than the old SKX, which was my previous benchmark. If I speed these two up, they go pretty well actually, considering their relatively modest price tags. At the end of the 20 minutes, there isn't much to split the two. They're both still going strong, but the underpants on the Citizen are only becoming more prominent with every passing minute. On wrist, another major strength of a titanium watch is the lack of weight and therefore the comfort, especially if you're wearing it as a daily, all day, every day, 7 days a week. This is a really nice, comfortable watch for me and my 7-inch wrist. I mentioned earlier on the protruding case back. That just disappears into the wrist, meaning you're left with that slim mid case and rather tall bezel. I also mentioned earlier on the fact that I think the clasp is perhaps a bit thick. I would have loved to have seen a taper from 20 down to 18 and back up to 20 at the clasp. That would have added a touch more elegance. But as this is an affordable tool diver, perhaps, again, I'm looking for something that isn't necessarily supposed to be there. Overhead shot, good but not outstanding. It's quite a thick bezel and quite a thin bezel insert, therefore the numerals, the printed numerals on the bezel insert are rather small. And the handset may be large, but they're not kind of giant, oversized large like I've seen on other Citizens. So yeah, so it does a job, but not ridiculous considering it is a full-size 41.5mm diameter watch. Likewise, I mentioned earlier on, the colour matched sort of date wheel white on black, perhaps not as legible as black on white. Again, you can see them, but older eyes might be better looking elsewhere. Moans and niggles, what am I going to complain about then? Well, I'm not going to complain about a couple of the things that I would normally complain about with titanium watches, that being that they scratch more readily and that they are slightly unpleasant to the touch because of the Duratec coating on this one. Neither of those things apply. You can still tell it's not stainless steel. It doesn't have the shininess that you get from steel. It does have a slightly duller grey colour, but the fact that there are high polished elements to the bracelet and the case kind of disguises that nicely. The lefty crown arrangement really is something you're going to have to get used to with these Citizens. It isn't intuitive at all. I find myself turning the watch upside down to set it. I'm sure most right-handed people will be doing the same thing. But the single biggest deficiency of the specifications of this watch I've managed to sidestep to this point, that's mineral crystal, not sapphire, which really brings the price back into the spotlight, doesn't it? $1,150 RRP for mineral crystal? No way, Citizen. Like I said, RRP is just outrageous for this one. It really does mean this is a 500 Aussie dollar or less watch, I think, despite the material, despite the high standard of finishing, and despite that coating, unless of course you want to change that yourself. Therefore, it does rather fit in between the Fugu and the NY0085. The cheaper 085 has mineral crystal, the more expensive Fugu has sapphire though. So what's your personal price tipping point then? How much are you prepared to spend on a watch with mineral crystal? At what point must it have sapphire? Me, I pay 400 Aussie no problem for mineral. Anything much more than that, even with the titanium, and I would be looking for sapphire. So Citizen, great watch, great material. Love the option of a classic ProMaster in tie, but can we please have a classic ProMaster in tie and with titanium, all for a reasonable price? Is that too much to ask? So why buy steel then when titanium watches are this good and this affordable? For me personally, I'd much rather have this one than the stainless steel Fugu, for example. I'd just need to upgrade the glass if I was going to run it long term and get it as close to Paul's price as possible. As discussed though, the weight thing is deeply personal. I know a lot of people, if not the majority of people, still prefer the look of steel and the feel of steel on wrist as well. I see no reason though why you can't enjoy both materials. I mean, there isn't a rule that says you can only have one or the other, is there? So there you have it, another great citizen with a wildly optimistic RRP when compared to the discount online retailer price. If you can get one of these for the price Paul paid, you are doing very well indeed, I think. But to answer the question, titanium or steel, I think the old El Paso girl got it right years ago. Why not both? If you want to see the best titanium watch I've ever seen, click here, or the best micro brand that only does titanium watches, click here. Thanks for watching this one. I hope to see you again in a future video.